February 2, 2008, a day that started like any other for Lindsay Buzayak, a 24-year-old real estate agent in Victoria, British Columbia. The sun was setting over the city as she prepared for a routine property showing. She had no idea that by the end of the day, her life would be brutally cut short in a house she was showing to potential buyers. It was a $1 million home at 1702 de Souza Place, a beautiful property with a stunning view. Lindsay had received a phone call earlier that day from a woman with a foreign accent. The woman claimed she and her boyfriend were interested in purchasing the house. At first, Lindsay was hesitant. Something about the phone call felt off. But despite her reservations, she agreed to meet them, trusting her professional instincts. Minutes after Lindsay arrived at the house, the couple walked through the door. A tall man, white and in his late 30s, and a woman, blonde, in her 30s or 40s. They seemed eager, serious about the property. But what happened next would turn this seemingly routine real estate showing into a horrifying nightmare. Lindsay was found dead, her body discovered in an upstairs bedroom, stabbed multiple times. There was no sign of a struggle, no defensive wounds. It was as if she had been caught completely off guard. Who were these people? Why did they choose Lindsay? And why, over a decade later, has the mystery of her murder remained unsolved? Despite countless leads, extensive investigations, and many theories, the truth behind Lindsay Buzayak's murder continues to elude authorities. In the next few minutes, we'll walk through the shocking details of Lindsay's last moments, the investigation that followed, and the chilling theories surrounding her death. This is the story of one of the most perplexing and heartbreaking unsolved murders in Canada's history. Lindsay Buzayak was more than just a 24-year-old real estate agent. She was a young woman with big dreams, working in one of Victoria's most competitive markets. Known for her charm and professional demeanor, she had built a solid reputation in the industry. By all accounts, Lindsay was on the fast track to success. But her life, like her career, was cut short by a moment of trust that would ultimately lead to her death. It was a few days before the murder when Lindsay received the unusual phone call. The woman, who identified herself as Sarah, claimed she and her boyfriend were interested in buying a luxury home in the area. They said they had recently relocated to Victoria and were in the market for a $1 million property. The couple was looking for something unique, and the property at 1702 de Souza Place seemed perfect. Lindsay, ever professional, agreed to meet them for the showing. But as the day approached, Lindsay began to feel uneasy. She had mentioned the appointment to her boyfriend, Jason Zalo, who was concerned about her meeting with the strangers. Jason had been by her side through the preparations, and he knew something didn't sit right with her. Lindsay had even told him about the odd tone of the phone call and how the woman's accent seemed off. She wasn't sure if it was real, but the clients had insisted on the appointment. Still, Jason remained uneasy and offered to wait outside in his car while Lindsay conducted the showing. Lindsay reassured him, but it was clear she was anxious. She arrived at the property and waited for the couple to show up. By 5 p.m., they still hadn't arrived, but Lindsay had a bad feeling. She was about to cancel when the couple finally appeared, both dressed in a manner that seemed fitting for a high-end property showing. The man was tall, with a commanding presence, and he spoke with a slight European accent. The woman was blonde, in her mid-30s, and dressed in an elegant manner. Their appearance was striking, yet their demeanor was cold. They introduced themselves and briefly discussed the property, but Lindsay couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She felt they were too eager, too urgent in their questions about the house. They made small talk, but their eyes always seemed to drift back to Lindsay. Lindsay's instincts told her to be cautious, but she continued with the showing. At one point, the couple split up, each taking a different floor of the house. She continued to guide the woman through the lower levels, while the man wandered upstairs. What happened next remains one of the biggest mysteries of the case. A few minutes later, Jason Zalo, who had been waiting in the car, decided to check on her. He parked and walked towards the house, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. As he approached the front door, something felt off. He tried calling Lindsay's phone. No answer. Jason entered the home through the unlocked front door and heard nothing. He began searching the house, calling out for Lindsay. When he reached the upstairs bedroom, he found her body, lifeless, lying in a pool of blood. Her face was pale, and her body showed no signs of struggle. It was as if she had been caught completely off guard, brutally attacked in an instant. The couple was gone. They had disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Jason immediately called 911, but it was too late. Lindsay Buzayak was dead. The investigators who arrived at the scene found no fingerprints, no DNA, no obvious clues to identify the killers. It was as though the crime had been carefully planned, executed, and erased from existence. The only clue, the unusual phone call Lindsay had received earlier that day. What had started as a routine real estate showing had turned into a scene of unimaginable horror, and Lindsay's death would leave authorities scrambling for answers, unable to identify the people responsible for her murder. The investigation began, but each lead seemed to go cold, and the case soon became one of the most perplexing and widely talked about unsolved murders in Canada. Lindsay Buzayak arrived at the property on D. Souza Place around 5:30 p.m., the sky already fading into darkness. As she walked up to the front door, she saw the couple waiting on the porch. The woman, described as blonde and in her early 30s, greeted Lindsay with a friendly smile. Her companion, a tall man in his late 30s, stood silently beside her, his demeanor stiff and cold. The couple appeared ordinary at first, just another set of potential buyers. Lindsay was hesitant. She had felt uneasy from the start, but the couple's eagerness to see the home seemed genuine. She led them through the spacious rooms, pointing out the property's features and the breathtaking view of the surrounding area. As they moved through the house, Lindsay's unease began to grow. The couple's behavior was odd. The man remained distant, hardly saying a word, while the woman asked very specific questions about the house's security and privacy. By the time they reached the upstairs bedroom, it was clear to Lindsay that something wasn't right. But she pressed on, trying to maintain a professional demeanor. Then, without warning, everything changed. As Lindsay stood near the bed, the woman suddenly rushed toward her. In a blink, the man followed suit. It wasn't an argument, nor a confrontation, just swift and calculated violence. Lindsay was overpowered in the blink of an eye. There was no warning, no time to escape. Within seconds, she was stabbed multiple times. The attack was brutal, quick, and silent. There were no screams, no sounds of struggle. It was as if the couple had planned every move carefully, executing it with chilling precision. Lindsay's body was discovered by her boyfriend, Jason Zalo, only minutes later. Jason had been waiting in his car nearby, just as he promised. After receiving no answer to his texts and calls, he went to the house to check on her. When he entered the front door, it was eerily quiet. He walked through the house, calling her name, his heart racing with growing concern. As he reached the upstairs bedroom, he found Lindsay. Her body was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken furniture, no blood trail leading from the room. It was as if she had been caught completely off guard. The only evidence of her violent end was the gruesome scene in front of him. Jason immediately called 911. When the authorities arrived, the house was treated as a crime scene. But there was one chilling detail. There were no fingerprints, no DNA left behind by the killer. The killers had left no trace, no obvious connection to the crime. It was as if the attackers had vanished without a trace. No one knew who they were, or why they had chosen Lindsay as their victim. The investigation into Lindsay Buzayak's murder began, but this shocking crime seemed impossible to solve. The mystery was just beginning, and it would become a case that would haunt the authorities, and the public, for years to come. As the news of Lindsay Buzayak's murder spread, the investigation began immediately, but the trail was far from clear. The scene of the crime was eerily devoid of clues that could lead investigators to the killer. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses who could provide solid information. The only clues that remained were the vague descriptions of the two suspects, a tall man and a blonde woman who had seemed normal at first glance. The police started their work by investigating Lindsay's personal and professional life, looking for any potential motives. Was it a personal vendetta? Could someone close to her have orchestrated the murder? Lindsay had no known enemies, and her relationships appeared solid. Yet, a deep dive into her recent interactions led authorities to focus on one possible lead, a man named Jason Zalo, her boyfriend. Jason was present when Lindsay left for the showing, and it was he who found her body. Though he had an alibi, the police felt that his connection to Lindsay's life made him a potential person of interest. But despite extensive questioning, no evidence linked him to the crime. The investigation quickly turned to the mysterious couple who had arranged the showing. But who were they? Why had they chosen this specific home? And why had they left no trail? The phone call that Lindsay received seemed to come from an untraceable burner phone, adding another layer of mystery. After the murder, the phone was turned off, never to be used again. As weeks turned into months and months into years, the investigation hit one dead end after another. However, several theories emerged, each adding a new twist to the case. Theory 1. The drug cartel connection. One of the most prevalent theories was that Lindsay's murder was connected to a major drug bust that had recently occurred in Alberta. It was suggested that Lindsay may have unknowingly become involved with dangerous people, possibly even drug cartels. Some believed that the couple who had contacted her were hitmen sent to silence her because she had witnessed something she wasn't supposed to. However, this theory was eventually debunked, as there was no substantial evidence connecting Lindsay to any criminal activities or cartels. Theory 2. A personal vendetta. Another theory that gained traction was that the murder was personal. Some suggested that Lindsay may have been targeted by someone she knew, someone close to her or involved in her personal or professional life. Investigators looked into her interactions with clients, co-workers, and even ex-boyfriends, but nothing seemed to fit. Still, many speculated that the killer could have been someone who knew her well, someone who was able to lure her into that fatal situation. Theory 3. Professional hit. A chilling theory that emerged was that Lindsay's murder might have been a contracted hit. The professionalism of the attack, her being caught off guard, no signs of struggle, and the swift getaway, made some believe that the murder was carefully planned. Was Lindsay targeted because of something she knew, or was she simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? The idea of a hitman hired to eliminate her raised unsettling questions, especially considering the manner in which she was killed. Theories on the couple. As investigators focused on the couple who had contacted Lindsay, they started to connect the dots. The woman who had made the initial phone call had a foreign accent, which led police to suspect that the suspects might not have been locals. The man was described as tall and well-dressed, and the woman as blonde with a calm demeanor. The strange details of the couple's behavior, never returning to the property, and their odd response to Lindsay's questions, seemed to point toward a well-rehearsed act. But who were they really? There were speculations that the woman could have been involved in criminal activity, perhaps as a recruiter for a hitman. But even as the investigation delved into these theories, the couple remained elusive. No one knew their identities, and as time passed, they seemed to vanish without a trace. The phone call and the burner phone. The burner phone used to contact Lindsay became a key piece of evidence in the case. It was activated shortly before the murder and deactivated immediately afterward, making it clear that whoever was behind the call had planned everything in advance. Investigators followed the phone's movements, but it appeared to have been used only for this single purpose. It was a chilling reminder that the killer, or killers, had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. Despite the dead ends, the investigation did not stop. The Saanich Police Department continued to gather information, chasing down leads and re-examining evidence with the hope that new forensic technologies would bring answers. They even reached out to the FBI to assist with the case, hoping that the involvement of federal resources could yield results. Public speculation. As the investigation stalled, the public took over. Theories about Lindsay's death circulated across social media, true crime forums, and podcasts. Some believed the truth would eventually come out, while others feared the case would remain a mystery forever. Lindsay's parents, Jeff and Diane Buzayak, refused to give up on their daughter's case. They became vocal advocates for justice, even organizing events like the annual Walk for Justice, to keep the pressure on law enforcement. Despite all the public interest and the relentless efforts of Lindsay's family, the case remained unsolved, its chilling nature only deepening with time. The murder of Lindsay Buziak seemed almost too calculated, too precise. But as investigators began combing through the details, some strange evidence emerged. One of the most puzzling pieces was the phone used to contact Lindsay. The call that lured her to D. Souza Place came from a phone purchased months before the murder in Vancouver. The phone had been activated just a few days before the showing and was turned off immediately after Lindsay's death. Whoever made the call knew what they were doing. The investigators traced the phone's movement across the city, revealing a pattern that seemed anything but random. It appeared that the killers had been following Lindsay's every move, tracking her to the exact location where she was going to meet them. But perhaps the most chilling detail was the fact that the phone had been activated and deactivated at specific times, as if it had been used exclusively for the purpose of this one crime. The killers were meticulous, planning every step. However, even with this traceable lead, the evidence was not enough to make an arrest. No fingerprints were found at the scene, and there was no DNA left behind. The crime scene appeared eerily clean. Investigators began to suspect that whoever carried out the murder was an experienced professional, someone who knew how to leave no trace. As the investigation dragged on, one breakthrough did seem to offer a glimmer of hope: the discovery of the car used by the suspects. Surveillance footage from nearby homes showed a dark vehicle, possibly a black sedan, parked near the house on the day of the murder. But as with most of the evidence, this lead led nowhere. The car's license plates were not identifiable, and its presence was just another mysterious piece of the puzzle. Despite these setbacks, the investigators were not ready to give up. One promising lead came in the form of a witness, Lindsay's boyfriend, Jason Zalo, who had been waiting for her just down the street when the murder took place. Jason had been the one to find her body, and his testimony would be crucial. He told investigators that he had seen a man and a woman walking toward the house right before the murder. His description matched the original suspects: the tall man, the blonde woman. But when police asked Jason to provide further details, something seemed off. Could he have been closer to the situation than he let on? Some began to wonder if Jason knew more than he was letting on. But in the face of all these leads and dead ends, one thing remained clear: whoever killed Lindsay had planned the murder meticulously. Every detail, from the phone call to the car to the lack of physical evidence at the scene, pointed to a well-organized and professional crime. But why? As the investigation continued to stall, the case grew colder. With no solid leads, and no one brought to justice, the public's attention shifted. But the Buziak family, especially Lindsay's father, Jeff, was relentless. He refused to let his daughter's death become another forgotten tragedy. Every year, Jeff held a memorial walk, demanding justice and pushing the authorities to keep searching for answers. Despite the passage of time, Lindsay's case remained a painful open wound, and Jeff's pursuit of the truth only intensified. There was one more breakthrough that would shake the investigation. DNA technology had advanced, and investigators were now able to re-examine the evidence, hoping for a new lead. The question remained: would these breakthroughs be enough to finally solve the case? Or would Lindsay Buziak's murder become just another cold case left to haunt the people who loved her most? As word spread about Lindsay Buziak's brutal murder, it didn't take long for the case to capture national attention. News outlets from across Canada, and even parts of the United States, began covering the chilling crime. The mystery of the young real estate agent's death, the bizarre nature of the crime, and the fact that no one had been arrested in the years following, turned Lindsay's murder into a haunting headline. The story quickly gained traction. Social media platforms buzzed with theories and speculation, as online communities began dissecting every known detail of the case. From the unusual phone call Lindsay received to the strange couple that showed up for the property viewing, people couldn't help but ask, who were these people, and what was their motive? In particular, the lack of physical evidence at the crime scene only deepened the mystery. With no fingerprints, no DNA, and very few clues to work with, the case became a puzzle that authorities struggled to piece together. The idea that such a brutal murder could happen in the middle of a supposedly routine real estate showing seemed almost impossible to comprehend. As the investigation stagnated, public interest only grew. Lindsay's parents, Jeff and Diane Buziak, became vocal in their quest for justice. They publicly demanded answers and pushed for greater attention on the case. In a desperate bid for resolution, they organized annual Walk for Justice events, hoping to keep the public focused on Lindsay's unsolved murder. These events became a way for the community to show support for Lindsay's family and to remind law enforcement that the case should never be forgotten. The media coverage wasn't limited to local news. High-profile programs such as Dateline and Crime Junkie podcast featured Lindsay's case, bringing it to an even wider audience. These documentaries and podcasts helped keep the story alive, allowing listeners and viewers from around the world to speculate, comment, and contribute their theories to the case. Some believed the case was part of a larger criminal conspiracy. Others thought Lindsay had been the victim of a random act of violence. Every new detail seemed to add more questions than answers. But amid all the public speculation, there was a growing frustration. The Buziak family felt abandoned by the police. The lack of progress on the case left them wondering if Lindsay's murder would ever be solved. And while the media coverage kept the case in the public eye, it didn't bring them any closer to finding her killer. Following Lindsay Buziak's murder, the investigation quickly ramped up. The Saanich Police Department, along with the RCMP, began their search for answers, but the case would prove to be far more complex than anyone anticipated. The crime scene offered little in the way of concrete evidence. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, and perhaps most frustratingly, no clear motive. It was as if Lindsay had been specifically targeted, but why? Authorities interviewed dozens of witnesses, including those who had interacted with Lindsay leading up to her death. They tracked down phone records, investigated the strange cell phone used to contact Lindsay before the showing, and even worked with forensic experts to analyze the evidence. But with each lead, the case seemed to stall. The couple who had lured Lindsay to the house vanished without a trace, leaving behind only their eerie presence and a long list of questions. Several theories emerged, but none were able to solve the puzzle. Was it a personal vendetta? A random act of violence? Or was there something darker at play, something involving people close to Lindsay or a professional hit? As the months turned into years, frustration set in. The investigation continued, but there were few breakthroughs. However, one constant throughout the process was Lindsay's family, especially her father, Jeff Buziak. Devastated by the loss of his daughter, Jeff became determined to keep the case alive in the public eye. He and Lindsay's mother, Jacqueline, tirelessly worked to ensure that the case was never forgotten. They organized memorials, participated in interviews, and most importantly, began pushing for answers, refusing to let Lindsay's death fade into the shadows. In 2010, Jeff Buziak initiated the Walk for Justice, an annual event meant to renew focus on Lindsay's case and call for action. The event gathered people from across the community, all rallying behind the search for justice. Jeff's dedication became the driving force for many, especially as the case remained unsolved. At the same time, law enforcement, aware of the growing public pressure, began to explore new avenues. In 2019, they brought in fresh eyes by enlisting the help of the FBI, leveraging their resources and expertise to dive deeper into the case. Forensic science had advanced significantly since the murder, and new tools were available to analyze the evidence that had been collected years earlier. In particular, investigators focused on re-examining the cell phone data and geographical patterns, hoping to identify new leads that could lead them to the killers. Despite all the efforts, the case continued to haunt the Buziak family. Each year, as the anniversary of Lindsay's death approached, they would reassemble their efforts, hoping for the breakthrough that never came. Jeff Buziak remained unwavering, calling out for transparency, accountability, and most of all, justice for Lindsay. But even with the FBI's involvement, even with new forensic methods, the killer remained elusive, and the case stood in limbo. The investigation was reopened multiple times, but the biggest question remained: why was Lindsay Buziak chosen? And who, exactly, was responsible for taking her life in such a cold, calculated manner? The truth was out there. But for now, it stayed just out of reach. Over the years, several theories have emerged in the quest to explain why Lindsay Buziak was murdered, but none have provided definitive answers. The case remains as chilling and perplexing as it was the day she died. Here are some of the most discussed theories surrounding her death. 1. The professional hit theory. One of the most plausible and unsettling theories suggests that Lindsay's murder was the work of hired killers. The manner in which the crime was carried out, with no signs of struggle and no direct confrontation, points to a calculated, planned execution. The killer knew exactly what they were doing and left no trace behind. The couple who met with Lindsay that day were never identified, and it's possible they were hired for the job. But who would have wanted her dead, and why? Some believe it could be related to someone in her professional or personal life. A disgruntled client, or even a business associate with a hidden agenda. But despite the theory's chilling logic, there's still no solid evidence to confirm this. 2. The drug cartel connection. Another theory suggests that Lindsay's murder may have been tied to organized crime. Around the time of her death, there were reports of a significant drug bust in Alberta. The theory gained traction when Lindsay's family revealed that she had been in contact with an acquaintance linked to this bust. Some believe Lindsay was unknowingly involved in a drug-related deal, and her murder was intended as a warning. However, after an extensive investigation, authorities found no direct evidence connecting her to any criminal activities or cartels. This theory remains largely speculative, with no concrete links to her death. 3. A personal vendetta. The most haunting theory of all is that Lindsay was murdered by someone she knew, someone who had a personal reason to harm her. Investigators have explored the possibility of a domestic or professional dispute turning deadly. In the months leading up to her death, Lindsay had started dating Jason Zalo, a man with deep ties to the local community. Some speculated that Jason's family or friends may have been involved, either directly or indirectly. It's a theory that is uncomfortable to consider, but it's been one of the most persistent questions in the investigation. If the murder was personal, it would explain why the killer was able to lure Lindsay into the home with relative ease. But with no evidence to tie anyone in her inner circle to the crime, this theory remains unconfirmed. 4. Mistaken identity or random violence. Finally, there's the theory that Lindsay's murder could have been a case of mistaken identity or simply a random act of violence. Maybe the killers were looking for someone else, someone who was connected to the house or the neighborhood, and Lindsay was at the wrong place at the wrong time. But again, this doesn't explain why the killers would be so precise, or why they would target a real estate agent rather than a homebuyer. It's a theory that doesn't quite fit with the facts, but it can't be completely ruled out either. As we look back on the case today, the truth remains elusive, and the question still lingers: who murdered Lindsay Buziak? While these theories offer possible explanations, none of them offer closure. Lindsay's death, as tragic and mysterious as it is, still haunts the people who loved her, and the community that once watched her rise to success. What's clear is this: whoever is responsible for her murder remains out there, and the mystery of Lindsay Buziak's death is far from solved. As the years pass, the search for answers continues. Lindsay Buziak's case has never left the minds of those who knew her, and the haunting question remains: who killed her, and why? With no suspects, no solid leads, and a community still grieving, the murder of Lindsay Buziak stands as one of the most chilling unsolved crimes in Canada. Despite the passage of time, there are still many unanswered questions. Was this a personal vendetta? A case of mistaken identity? Or was Lindsay just a victim of a calculated, cold-blooded crime orchestrated by someone with a hidden agenda? Theories continue to swirl, but with no clear evidence to bring the killer to justice, the case remains open, a cold case that has yet to be solved. But Lindsay's family, particularly her father Jeff Buziak, refuses to give up. He's made it his mission to keep the investigation alive, relentlessly pushing for answers and keeping her memory in the public eye with annual walks for justice. Every year, the community comes together in her name, determined not to let her story be forgotten. The only question left now is: could you be the one to help crack this case wide open? If you have any information, or if you believe you have a theory that could bring justice to Lindsay's family, don't stay silent. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Every small detail matters. And if you want to keep up with more true crime cases like this one, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for updates on future videos. The truth is still out there, and we all deserve to know what really happened to Lindsay Buziak.